Muchas gracias a José Luis Tedesco por esta introducción. Vamos entonces a presentar al primero de los disertantes, Alexander Doring, que es economista agrícola egresado de la Universidad de Bonn, Alemania, en 1991. Fue secretario general de la Federación Europea de la Industria del Alimento Balanceado. Tiene una sólida experiencia de trabajo con las instituciones de la Unión Europea, como su participación en la Directoría General de Salud Pública, justamente de la Unión Europea, Salud Pública y Agricultura, también en la Autoridad Europea de Seguridad Alimentaria, EFSA, y en la Autoridad Europea de Agricultura y Veterinaria, OAB, y también en distintos talleres de capacitación sobre seguridad alimentaria. Actualmente, Alexander Doring es presidente de la Federación Internacional de la Industria de la Alimentación. Queda con ustedes entonces Alexander Doring y la primera presentación de esta conferencia plenaria, Mercado de la producción certificada, valor y sustentabilidad. Adelante, por favor.
Muchas gracias. So that's all the Spanish I can offer you, so I have to start with two apologies this morning. First for my poor Spanish, but hopefully next time we can improve on that. My daughter is studying agriculture in Spain, and she has a boyfriend from Argentina, from Tucumán province, so I'm hoping I can improve on that record for the next time. So second apology is I work for a non-profit organization, and actually I'm not the president. You will see the photo of our president shortly. So I will not buy a ton of soybean here, but still I hope I can make a valuable proposition to you, to Aapresid, in terms of our direct cooperation between FIFAC, feed manufacturers, and you as soy producers. We need the direct partnership with you. We need the direct dialogue with you to move ahead, to prepare the future, especially when it comes to the supply of responsibly produced soybeans to support our efficient livestock production here in Europe. And I will explain you why. Now, Aapresid, Marianne asked me first of all make clear on who we are. And I know we look back to already a couple of years of good partnership. We had experts from your team, Aapresid team, in our earlier workshops on responsible soy in Europe, which started about 2008, so 7-8 years ago, when the pressure really started to build up on European feed industry when it comes to check their credentials on the supply of responsible soy. And as you well know, this was not because of Argentina and what you're doing here, but mainly about what's happening up north in Brazil, and mainly linked to the whole issue of deforestation, which luckily for you and other producers is not the main pressure factor, but you know, we have some specific issues to address in that context also here in the Argentinian context. You know, the last time we got attacked on Argentinian soybean meal was about 3-4 years ago, when Greenpeace dubbed Argentinian soybean as the poisonous soybeans because of pesticide applications, aerial spraying and things like that. So maybe even if you're not directly in the spotlight of some of our very active NGOs, there are issues which should be certainly addressed by us together in such a partnership. So FIFAC altogether, thanks to EU enlargement, now represents about 30 countries, and that includes neighbors like Turkey and Russia, Norway. So it's not just the EU, as I will show you shortly. So our membership geographically runs from the Azores, close to you, up to Vladivostok, very far away, already at the border to China, but that's the geographic setup. Of course, mainly we are an EU-based organization, so our head office is in Brussels, and we have most of the national feed associations in our membership. And that altogether represents about 4,000 feed mills in Europe, who produce about 153 million tons of compound feed. And that's a rather stable figure. We are in a very saturated market as far as livestock is concerned, but because of the China factor that is benefiting your farmers, also our livestock farmers are benefiting from that. More and more our livestock industry is driven by exports to Asia, to China, whether it's milk or meat. So there is if we have any growth in the meat sector and milk sector in Europe, it's because of export opportunities elsewhere, even though Russia has closed its border for now. Let's see to that. So what brings us close to your activities here on your certification scheme is our Committee on Sustainability. That's what I've pointed up in red. I don't know, let's see if it works. Yes, there it is, Sustainability Committee. So we have now a full-fledged Sustainability Committee looking at responsible sourcing of all our raw materials. Obviously, we are talking soy here today, but the social pressures in Europe are very strong, meaning we have to look at the credentials and at the best agricultural practices for anything that we are using in the feed industry. So, again, here's the geographic setup for our organizations. Now, Russia is too big to fit on one map, so that's why we kind of cut it halfway through, about Moscow line. But basically, the Russian feed manufacturers are with us, as are the Turkish, and they are, of course, some of the strongest growth markets for compound feed, whereas it's rather flat in the rest of Europe. Both Russia, Turkey know about almost two-digit growth rates every year, so that's where a lot of the investment is taking place right now. And of course, I can already make the announcement here. It's one of the reasons why we're going to Turkey next year with our Global Congress and our European Congress, and we very much hope that on our roundtable for responsible supply, we can welcome your president, Pedro Maria Giraudo, at that occasion. Now, again, as I said, unfortunately, I'm not a buyer for your products, but our role is clearly to kind of build the landscape for responsible supply, which we regard as a non-competitive issue. It's, I think, very important. Our experience as FFAC over the years has been very much focused on feed safety. You may know that we have been running through some problems there, going back to BSE and dioxins and what have you. So that's still the major priority, but it's a non-competitive issue. And that's the same attitude we take on sustainable supply. It should be a pre-competitive and non-competitive issue. It's the license to produce. That's what we understand by sustainability. If you're not sustainable, you cannot stay on the market. That's our lookout for the future. And that's why we are in this game. And by producing guidelines to our manufacturers, and we just issued our professional recommendation on soy purchasing, on purchasing of responsible soy this week. We've just communicated it to Aapresid, to your team here. And of course, that's where we had an intensive cooperation with your organization over the past couple of months. And we hope also during the implementation phase of these guidelines in the next few months. Now, obviously, you are using the same famous circles as we do, so I have to go back because I can see now, I just saw the picture of our president. I don't know why it's not here. Let me see. Maybe there is a problem there. Let me see at this moment. Now, let's see. You briefly saw him. Our president, Ruud Thijsens, is really running the campaign on responsible sowing very intensively. He has been here with your board in April, and he will come back in September with an expert team that will explain you the details of the guidelines. So don't look at me as an expert for the guidelines itself. What I want to present you is the framework, and that is, of course, the well-known circle, let's say the tripod circle with the key elements on sustainability. And when we look to the place of our guidelines, we look mainly to the issue of efficient feed production and the issue of responsible supply chain. So these two go together, and I will see whether I can work that. And this is the main axis. We are looking at environment and economic conditions for responsible supply. Now, here he is. So I was a bit fast. So Ruud Thijsens is heading our executive committee called the Presidium. He is he is running the campaign. We will issue a press release on the publication of the guidelines next week, and then roll out a communication plan, and that you will be, as Aapresid, the first organization to contact. So we hope to see some of you back in a technical workshop here in Rosario on 7th September. We will discuss with your team later today, what is the best setup for that. So that is the best place to come and to go into the specific of the guidelines itself. I will just give you the general framework for that, as I said before. And now look again at the total market picture. This is important to understand where we are in the chain in Europe. I mentioned the 153 million tons of compound feed, which you see here, but we are not a bottleneck industry. And that is very important to understand. So while we have an important position in the feed market, we are not in a bottleneck situation like oil crushers are or other parts of the agri-food chain, as a lot of the feed is produced, like here in Argentina, on farm. So 2/3 of all the feed consumed by our farm animals are produced on farm, and a lot of your soybean products actually go directly with the I think we need to move on. Please, the next slide. I don't know why this is, yeah, here we go. So we have to, we have to look at that part of the feed chain, which, let's say the yellow chunk here, maybe I will not use the pointer here, meaning a lot of the soybean meal you're exporting to Europe actually goes directly to home mixing, not through us, but directly on large home mixing operations. So, but still, we are a key driver in these discussions on the conditions for responsible supply. In the end, as feed industry, we're always on the spot, whether it's on the home mixing level or on our level. Usually the public pressure, stakeholder pressures, pressure from the supermarkets are directly voiced towards us. So where does the feed disappear? I think you're quite familiar with these numbers. It's mainly on the side of poultry is the #1 sector, followed by pigs and then cattle. But we expect the dairy industry will be the key driver in the next years. The biggest prospects for our exports to Asia are in the dairy chain. And so we consider to be the dairy sector as the locomotive. And really, when it comes to responsible supply chain, that's where the biggest pressure is coming from. It's not the meat sector, it's really our dairy sector that is pushing the button and is raising the pressure on responsible soy and other products. So maybe this is enough about numbers. Again, the leading countries are Germany, France, and Spain. And at this moment, I would say, on responsible supply, you know that basically the Netherlands, UK, Northwestern Europe have been the main driver. Germany and France are just about to get into the game because they look for ways to get out of the non-GM discussion. And this is very important to understand in our market position. Hey guys, supermarkets, there's something better out there. Forget non-GM. There is no future in non-GM. I mean, no future in terms of going to a mainstream market, but look at sustainable supply. We want to transform the soybean market into a mainstream market for responsible supply. And we have countries like Belgium which already went through the cycle. UK just dropped their demands on non-GM last year. In France and Germany, it's still very touchy, it's very sensitive, but we see first hopeful signs they could get out of that, let's say, very, what I call a very sterile discussion on non-GM. It's already solved in the marketplace. We do have non-GM propositions, but we're trying to take the supermarkets with us on the journey towards sustainable soy. So look at France and Germany as the key game changers, because if Germany and France with their market pressure would come along, we have the situation that we are looking for, transforming the market of soy from a niche market into a mainstream market, going out of the niche marketing for certain responsible soy schemes today towards a mainstream market. So that's the main message here. Now, we'll not stop with the numbers because time is running fast. Let's go to the key messages. You know you're #1 supplier on meal products, and of course we hope that will stay in that way. But we think to make sure that your leadership is and your investment is recognized, please cooperate with us directly to make sure that the credentials you have built up over the years on no-till farming, on your certification schemes are fully recognized by our market partners. That's the opportunity we'll offer to you. Come to us so that we can help communicate the key facts that you have built up over the years on making sure that your production is sustainable, can be transmitted to our market partners. We want to increase, that's the second key message here, market transparency. There's a lot of confusion about sustainable soy right now in Europe, and one of the reasons for that is the situation that we will show you here. Let's first make it also show why this is a win-win situation also for our livestock farmers. Soybean meal is the guarantee for an efficient, resource-efficient livestock production. There is no alternative, no viable alternative to soybean meal as a nutritious product. And you know the facts. You're participating in many of the nutritional studies here. But it's also a clear factor that it has the ideal amino acid composition, as you well know, and but it also has the, in terms of the margin, and this is most important, it has the biggest single benefit for livestock farmers' margin. If you take out soybean meal from our formulations, farm margins would drop by 1/3, and they're already in a tight spot today, as you well know, from rather low producer prices. And you can see that best here. If you look at the bottom line, feed profit, you remove soybean meal from our rations, and basically producer margins drop by 30%. So there is no alternative option. But we have to support the good name of soybean meal. Soybean is under attack in Europe, mainly because of the deforestation issue in Brazil. But there are other issues linked to monoculture, pesticides use. You know, there's a huge campaign against glyphosate right now as a potential cancerogenic substance. You know how would soybean production look in Argentina without glyphosate? Well, I think you know better the answer than I do, but these are the kind of campaigns running against soybeans. And we have to build some counter pressure on that, and for that we need the direct dialogue with you. So here we are, to sum it up, we have this important dependency, and this will not go down by any means in the future. Yes, we will support European production of soybean. Of course, we want to help our own producers, but in the short term, in the next 10, 15 years, there's no way we can see that the important import deficit can be reduced significantly with such programs. I mentioned market transparency, and this is what our producers see. We have a lot of responsible soy schemes out there, and this is just a couple of them. Of course, we put your own certification program on this list. So this is what is making the marketplace very confusing, because a lot of customers have their own preferences regarding certification programs, and you will recognize some of them. Of course, I look to Agustin. RTRS is a leading scheme here, but there are others on the same front. We will have a speaker for the biodiesel section here later on. So this is the idea of our guidelines, to help bringing more transparency to the market by offering a benchmark program. And to finalize my statements here, I would just say, keep those key messages with you. It's about making sure we have an independent benchmark system based on our guidelines. So any of your producer programs like the Aapresid certification programs will be able to come to us in September, making sure that your own requirements are fitting with our own setup, and that will bring you recognition for your own efforts here, and that will help us to better communicate to our downstream partners in terms of bringing more market transparency to the program. So obviously we expect RTRS, ISCC, and other partners to follow the same road, come through us. The independent benchmarking will be done through ITC. It's a subsidiary body of the WTO. They have a standards map on soy. Probably, if you know it, they already have 50 standards listed there, and they will run the benchmark system for us. So in my final words, I will stop here because there are more slides to come, but for the benefit of the other speakers, I will just say, please keep on your notes that our guidelines are a professional recommendation. We do not take responsibility for the final decision of the buyers. Whether a feed company, obviously due to their own marketing programs, to their own customer relations, will have to take that final decision. But we will raise the baseline. Our guidelines are a game changer to move the current niche marketing of sustainable soy towards a mainstream market proposition. And that is where we need your help, and that is where we hope we can again build and continue with the excellent dialogue we have with Aapresid over the years, and we hope to discuss the more specific elements of these guidelines and the way we can cooperate here in a technical workshop in September. Thank you for your attention.
Le agradecemos a Alexander Doring por esta presentación y damos paso a la segunda de esta conferencia plenaria. Está a cargo de Michelle Morton. Ella tiene una licenciatura en Ingeniería Química con un posgrado en Administración de la Universidad McGill en Montreal, Canadá. Es gerente de Shell de la sostenibilidad de los biocombustibles. Es responsable del programa Global Assurance para las compras de biocombustibles. Es la representante de Shell en varias iniciativas de múltiples partes interesadas, mesas redondas de discusión de commodities. Queda entonces con ustedes Michelle Morton y la segunda presentación de esta conferencia plenaria, Mercado de la producción certificada, valor y sustentabilidad. Adelante, por favor.
Thank you, and good morning. Indeed, I'd like to share some elements of the energy market and the biodiesel and biofuels markets from Shell's perspective, hopefully to share with you that it's a small but growing market for certified sustainable products. Firstly, just a little warning. This is just a legal comment. And obviously, if I say something about the future, you should take information from many places, not only from my presentation, before you buy shares or something in a company. So just to explain, my introduction explained I work in Europe. And my job is after all of the global purchases that we make of biodiesel and bioethanol. We don't make any of our own, except for our joint venture in Brazil. We buy our biofuels. And so how do we buy that? That sort of policy is something I work on. Also working with our suppliers, convincing them to become certified. And then thirdly, I work with the schemes such as the Roundtable for Responsible Soy. So that's the nature of my job. But briefly here in Argentina, just to share with you, I'm sure you know Shell, my company. We've been over 100 years. This year it's 101 years in Argentina, so a long history here, and we make 13% of the energy here in Argentina. We have quite a number of retail gasoline and diesel sites here with high quality, low sulfur fuels. So to talk about biofuels, we need to talk about the context of the future and the future energy needs out to, say, 2050. And basically, we predict that there'll be a doubling of energy requirements by 2050. Why? Well, the population will increase, people will become wealthier, so we'll use more energy, and will therefore also buy more vehicles, so we see an increase in transport energy as well. And this will put pressure on supply, and also pressure because we need to reduce our CO2 emissions for climate change. So how are we going to do that is the challenge for all of us in the future. We need to be more efficient with how we find and use energy, and we need more renewable energy. We think there'll be probably 4 times more renewable energy by 2050 compared to today. But of course, the solutions will be different in different countries, and we probably need all of the solutions together at the same time. I'm just referring to my notes to make sure I don't forget to say something. Yes, I was going to mention about electric vehicles. So we see there'll be an increase in electric mobility, probably more in cities and probably more with light vehicles. However, we're going to need biofuels. Why? Because the aviation, the marine, the heavy-duty trucking sectors will likely still use liquid, high-density fuels like today's gasoline and diesel. And how do we remove or lower the CO2 emissions? Biofuels. So biofuels will stay with us for a long time, even when we have more of other solutions, which we also need. They will still be biofuels in the future. Of course, biofuels have other benefits as well. So countries are interested in them from a national perspective because you can diversify your supplies. You could import less crude oil, which can give you more energy security. And of course, of interest to you, perhaps more, is it can help the rural economy by providing a new market for farmers. So biofuels will not be used unless governments push them, because they are more expensive than fossil fuels. So we need regulations. And governments around the world have put blending regulations in place for a variety of reasons. The 3 reasons I mentioned, either greenhouse gas is important, or energy security, or it's for domestic economy. So different governments, different priorities. But all that's resulted in regulations and an increase in biofuels usage globally. It also helps to support research and development into advanced bioenergy and biofuels, and Shell's very active in investing in those future fuels. Of course, originally biofuels were very supported by NGO groups like WWF and even Greenpeace. At the beginning were pushing biofuels, and now they have changed a little bit, and there's quite a lot of criticism of biofuels for the same reasons that we've heard from the previous speaker. So it tends to be now, biofuels are now associated with deforestation, with social problems, which really were there before biofuels. They're perhaps pre-existing agricultural issues, which are now also the fault of biofuels. And there's even some new issues that people talk about with biofuels regarding indirect land use change. And of course, do they really save carbon? What is the greenhouse gas savings? So all this has led to a lot of questions. And unfortunately, very few governments have put in place mandatory sustainability requirements, as well as the blending regulations. So for example, in Europe, we have the Renewable Energy Directive, and it has environmental and carbon regulations. And in the United States and Canada, we have carbon regulations also, so carbon savings requirements. However, even if everybody, all the governments, put in place mandatory sustainability, the consumption by the biofuels market of those feedstocks is quite small, and really we need the food, and for soy, the feed sectors, to lead on sustainability, which they are. So Shell supports regulations, but also we support voluntary schemes, such as this Aapresid agriculture certificada and the Roundtable for Responsible Soy. We think these schemes are very good because it provides a good place for us to debate the positives and the negatives of agricultural practices, and together to decide what is the future. Should we make a standard? And if we make a standard, probably it'll have a lot of things in the standard which will please many of the stakeholders, but also it can be pragmatic because we have people on the ground, the farmers, who understand what can be done, what cannot be done. And I should add that we have supported these voluntary schemes, particularly in Argentina, by buying credits, which have got both the Aapresid standard and the RTRS standard. So farmers who have done both, we have been supporting that one. This slide is to share with you what our feedstocks are in the biofuels that we buy. So you can see that it's heavily dominated by corn, and this is from the United States gasoline market. So that's a very large fuels market for us, but for everybody. It's a big population, they drive a lot, it's a huge fuels market. So our soy percent is quite small. It's only about 5%. But I want to point out that of our global usage, overall 80% is already certified. That's mostly driven by European requirements, but also 100% of our palm oil is certified. And now we are working on increasing the soy and the sugarcane certification. So in 2014, we blended 9 billion liters of biofuels. So you can do the math to see 5% was soy. And we've actually been increasing the amounts of wastes and residues that are used as feedstocks. So we buy from producers, for example, in Europe who use used cooking oil. That's becoming very popular for biofuels. And it's more sustainable because there's not a lot of use for used cooking oil. And we're increasing the amount of RTRS certified soy, particularly here for Argentina. So to summarize, biofuels are going to be needed for the future. They're not all the same, but they can and should be done well. And by done well, I mean they should be sustainable and have carbon savings, have greenhouse gas reductions compared to fossil fuels. And for Shell, all of our fuels, our biofuels rather, have got sustainability contract clauses in place, which covers previous land use requirements and social items, and we have the right to audit our suppliers. But what would be better than us auditing our suppliers would be that the suppliers themselves are already audited to a generally agreed standard. So we are seeking to increase our volume of certified sustainable biofuels. Thank you very much.